Good evening. Nice to see you. Welcome to the Bronx Buzz. This is Bronx Night's program where we talk to reporters and writers and editors and journalists and people who are writing stuff about the Bronx. And we get some insight as to what they're thinking about when they're writing it, a little background about what is actually being put out. And in our second segment, we're going to talk to a veteran, and a United States military veteran who wrote a couple of books because he's concerned about a very simple process called etiquette, that we ought to be nice to each other. Isn't that unique? Anyway, in our first segment, let's go to our buddy David Brand, who is a reporter covering housing for Gothamist and WNYC. Nice to see you again, David.
Thanks for having me, Gary.
If you talk to people about the biggest issues in New York City, many of them will probably talk about the economy first. They'll talk about crime, but housing is certainly right up there. Mayor Adams came out with a housing plan. I like the way your headline says it targets every New York City neighborhood. Give us a little background. What is the plan? The mayor calls it the city, part of the city of yes. What do we got?
Well, you're right. He's targeting every neighborhood in the city. He says he's going to build a little more housing in every part of New York City, and that includes the suburban parts of Staten Island, Northeast Queens, even parts of the Bronx, as well as like core Manhattan, where we have these cavernous office towers on either side of the street, and many of them unused, so it could make way for some new apartments. So, a couple points here. I guess it's actually a lot of different proposals packaged into one thing that is going to go before community boards and go before the city council for final approval. And some of the main takeaways are plans to allow one and two family homeowners to put up another apartment either in the basement or in the backyard or in the attic legally at their residences. So that's targeting those kind of lower density areas. And then he says they're going to do the missing middle housing, which is adding kind of some affordable housing, some market rate housing to places like on top of stores, that like if you have like apartment buildings next to stores and the stores are just a single story, then developers are going to be able to legally add a couple more stories on top of those commercial spaces. And then, as I noted, in these very dense, like core Manhattan areas, going to be able to make it easier to convert offices into housing. So,
That's
something for
to
everyone.
me that's a really a big one. Every mayor, and you could look at De Blasio, and you can go back to Bloomberg and Giuliani, and go back to Dinkins, and of course Ed Koch, who is well known for building, new housing, has a housing plan. Is there a way to think that this is different? I realize he's got a lot of empty space in Manhattan that didn't used to exist, so that's one. Is there anything really distinctive or different other than just identifying, getting into neighborhoods, identifying places, and say, okay, housing, we need housing, put it here.
Yeah. Well, I think what makes this somewhat different is this isn't just setting targets on the number of apartments that he wants to create or the number of homes
I
or
think the number, by the way, was 100,000. I read
that's what
that
he
in
said.
your
Yeah.
article.
Yeah. And so he says this could lead the way to 100,000 new apartments, but it's like small, relatively small changes that add up that he says are going to make a big difference. And so maybe that's what's a little different. It's changes to the zoning code to allow for more housing everywhere. And so he and his deputies are really framing this through like a racial justice lens and saying a lot of these zoning restrictions were put in place to prevent new development and often to prevent
Oh.
lower income people, people of color from coming in to specific neighborhoods. So they're really leaning on that. And
Hmm.
there's definitely truth to that. I don't know if, if no single proposal here is going to like end the housing crisis, but
There's no easy answer.
yeah, taken together, maybe put a dent in it.
Knee-jerk reaction from city council members yet? Because I haven't read or seen anything yet. I mean, I don't want to say it's been quiet because your article really explained it nicely.
Thank you.
But do you get a sense of whether this is going to be received well?
Well, so far there haven't been that many details released, and I think
Uh,
everyone's still waiting to see like what the specifics are. He announced this at an event at Borough of Manhattan Community College. It had kind of like the pomp of like a state of the city address or something like that. And so he had a number of elected officials, including several council members, a couple borough presidents who are all going to weigh in on this plan eventually. they've been pretty positive about kind of the thrust of it. I think with the specifics that are going to, uh,
In each neighborhood, it's almost like, "Hey, I love the plan," and then all of a sudden,
yeah,
"Wait, you're doing that in my neighborhood?"
yeah. Well, two things I think are going to become like pretty contentious. One is there's some focus on affordable housing, but there's not really any details on like what that actually means. And so if
Right?
you're allowing developers to add extra space in their projects if they make it affordable, but they don't say like what the income levels for that is. And the other one I think is going to appeal to a lot of, or I think a lot of viewers going to hear about is taking away requirements that developers have to add off-street parking to
I
new
you
housing.
you literally hit the 2 things that I circled out of which I have right in my notes. So let's start with the first one. We've had what is it, 421A, and it's been a controversy on all sides for a very long time, and frankly, I don't know that we still know what we're gonna do with that, and the whole idea of rewards for developers who add more income, restricted units to their projects. How is that gonna work? Is that tax incentive through the city? Are you asking the state to do that? Are you just gonna make a bonus of you know what I mean? How does that work? And you are correct, Dave, in saying, "Well, let's find out the details."
Right, and I think that's the main takeaway right now. Like I've talked to some people in the private development sphere, and they say
Mhm.
yes, developers will take advantage of that bonus
Well, of
if
course.
there's an incentive to do it, which right now there might not
And
be.
in some neighborhoods, you talked about even quote unquote suburban type neighborhoods, you start doing that, all of a sudden your very happy project is not all of a sudden happily welcomed and rezoning is not happily welcomed in that particular community.
Yeah,
This is going on all over the place. And certainly in the East Bronx, we've had plenty of that, that whole notion. So we'll see. The other one, which is, I'm a driver in New York City, and happily my building does have a parking space that I can use. But and traffic with congestion pricing and everything else is a really big issue. And if you're going to build a housing of, let's say 6 stories or 8 stories, and I don't know how many apartments, depending how many, 30 or 40 or 50 apartments, and what the percentage shows that maybe 25 or 30 of them are going to have cars. What are you going to do with those 30 cars if you if you don't require some parking to be part of it? And I understand that he wants to build apartments as opposed to garages, but, you know
yeah, yeah. I mean, that's what's getting a lot of the early headlines.
oh, that it is,
Anything
yeah.
parking related is, it's a hot topic, and people do fear where are they going to park at night if more people are bringing cars and there's fewer places to put them. I guess I would just point out this doesn't eliminate off-street parking with new development. It just gets rid of rules of saying how much you have to
Yeah.
include. And so
That
people,
that
I would,
that scares me, man. I gotta tell you, it scares me because now and again, I'm looking at the conflict. So I have a car because, me and my family, we like to drive to Westchester, but you're telling me I can't use or I shouldn't use my car to drive to Manhattan, so I'm gonna keep the car and store the car, but you're not giving me a place to park it, and even if I park it in an alternate side and I go downtown to work and I take mass transit, which is what they want to encourage me, um, who's gonna go move my car across the street,
uh,
I'm working on it, I'm not figuring that out.
could be a good time to get into the private parking garage business, and if these rules were to go through. But I think we're going to hear a lot about them.
Yeah, we probably will. And it's funny you say that. This is a little bit off topic. This is on the congestion pricing topic. There's obviously a lot of concern in the northernmost borough about people wanting to drive their cars to like the first stop on the subway lines and
Yeah,
have a place to park. And again, if you can figure out how to build a parking lot, you probably can do
yeah.
pretty well.
Time to cash
When
in.
will we see more details, or it's going to just roll out when the mayor is good and ready?
That's a good question. I mean, the first public hearing on these proposals is this week,
Oh,
and so I think they're taking like uh, public testimony or allowing people to sign up to speak, and then I think it's going to go before community boards in the
soon
coming
the
months.
housing committee. This is off the top of my head. Council member Sanchez, the Bronx council member, is the chair of the housing committee.
That's
I'm
correct.
glad I remembered that on the spot. I didn't look it up.
She
Um,
is.
so, well, then, in fact, I ran into her the other day. She wanted to come on the show, and I said, we'll find a spot to bring her on and ask that.
Yeah.
Well, before we run out of time, I want to ask you about public housing and NYCHA. Um, one of the many issues is vacant units, and you did a report or you wrote about a report that says it's taking over a year to fix those apartments. What's the issue there? Why can't we just empty them out and bring people in?
Yeah, it's taking NYCHA and the city 3 times as long over the past
Wow.
year to bring these vacant apartments back online, and that's during an affordable housing and homelessness crisis that's getting worse and worse. So I think it's really unclear. I mean, what they say is that they're doing more intensive work to bring these places up to code. They say people live in public housing for an average of 25 years. Rules have changed in the meantime, so they have to do more intensive inspections. There's a lot of things they have to fix. They have to do lead and mold and asbestos remediation to make them safe.
Right.
But an entire year is a long
Is
time.
is a long time when the need for housing and for need for even somewhat affordable housing is so great. One of the things I know in my own neighborhood is the personnel, the maintenance personnel to do the work, and I don't know whether NYCHA is filled with. It's stocked with enough maintenance personnel, but that could be another issue that some of these projects don't have enough personnel to do that work,
Yeah, and we're
you
seeing
know?
that across the city now with a lot of services and a lot of staff vacancies, really affecting and diminishing services.
Dave, we got about a minute left. Our guest, David Brand from WNYC and Gothamist, who deals with housing. You got something coming up that you want to tell us about?
Well, we launched an eviction tracker
Oh,
a
yes,
couple
right.
months ago, and that's uh, mapping all of the executed evictions in New York City. And it's kind of unique because a lot of the reporting you see on evictions is about filing. These are actually evictions that marshals have carried out. People have been displaced. So you can check that out on our website. We started our project by reporting on a specific part of Brooklyn with 2,500 apartments. About a third of tenants have
Mhm.
received eviction notices. We're focusing on Staten Island, and we're going to be working on the Bronx as well. So
I was
love.
going to say you got to come up here. I think the last report I saw said that the Bronx was second most evictions in the state, and that would, of course, be of concern to us. David Brand, what would we do without you? We'd have no place to live. Uh, Probably not. But anyway, really, David, you do a great job
Thank
at
you.
Gothamist. Let's check him out. He does housing for WNYC and Gothamist, and he also comes on our program and tells us what's going on. We appreciate that.
Thanks for having me.
Great. We'll take a short break, and then we're going to let's see, people learning everyday etiquette. That's what's coming up next. Don't go away.
Hey, boss. Okay.
I said I'm fine.
Put me to bed, see you in the morning. With the frosted Superman, but it wasn't on it. And we lost it.
You can talk to me.
It's been really, really hard for me.
Is it time yet?
It's time.
Let's start time for dinner.
Oh, it's really
Faster dinner.
Donating pet food is one of the many ways you can help families in your community. Pets and people belong together. Learn more at petsandpeopletogether.org.
So much.
Fostering a pet for a friend or neighbor can keep families together. Learn more at petsandpeopletogether.org.
Okay, back with you on the Bronx Buzz. We thank David Brand for joining us. He's such a great reporter and provides such great information. We're going to bring in a guy who wrote these two books, and Positive Learning Equates Etiquette and people learning everyday etiquette. My summary of them is, can't we all just be nice to each other? Uh, and let's bring on my buddy Percylee Anderson. Nice to see you, Percylee. Thank you so much for putting this out, and thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you there. I'm
Um,
glad to
I,
be
I
here.
will. I will tell people he's got the thing that says Navy. He's a proud military veteran. You were just telling me you served in the '80s. So just a little background about you there, and then we'll talk how we met and move to the next step. But a little bit about your service. I think we love and respect our service members so well.
Okay, I went in the Navy in 1982. I was on the delayed entry program. I had signed up a year before that, and eventually 82, March the 2nd, and left
Okay,
to go to Great Lakes, Illinois. Went New York style,
and
had the haircut
and
already
then and
shaped up
then
and everything.
and you served overseas. Overseas, of course, the Navy. You would assume you're going to be overseas, but
Yes,
where did you
I
serve?
was stationed on an aircraft carrier,
Mhm.
USS John F. Kennedy.
There you go. Listen, thank you for your service. Well, what gave you the idea that you ought to be writing books about etiquette? How did we go from being, one of our most valued Americans as a service member to being an author about etiquette? So interesting.
Well, there are, as you can see behind me, there's couple of frame books back there. Let me
Mhm.
see if I can move to the side.
That's all right.
And me and a co-author had had conversations, and usually when conversations die out, nothing changes. So we started writing, and she's in the educational field, and that's what she continued in. We had a summer camp. We partnered up, but the books had been in DOE portal. We didn't know anything about getting a W-9 or anything as far as going into the school system. But I went ahead and she went into her school field, and I continued to write. What made me come up with this was I could see the way society had been changing with the mannerism of individuals, not only children, but even our elders. Disrespect, I say, had went to a whole new level completely. I held the door for an old couple. They walked through like I was the doorman. Or you got a group of people walking down the street. Nobody decides to form to one side and let people pass by. You nearly have to say, "Excuse me," to get their attention. It's just natural just to move over one side. But when you're walking, you walk down one side and up the other. So this is based on base courtesy, manner, and respect.
Mhm.
That's my basis behind writing these books.
And you feel, I mean, both of us are a little bit older than we used to be,
Yes.
and you feel that things have been changing. You know what I conclude, and I tell people this all the time. Here's my cell phone, and we have these incredible devices to communicate that you couldn't even imagine when we were. I mean, could you imagine that your whole music library is on a thing
Oh,
this? I
yes.
mean, it's crazy, or that you could call somebody or put them on TV or whatever it is, and you could do all that. And yet we communicate worse than ever. And I really
Yes.
feel like, and I'm gonna give you an anecdote that a friend told me. He's a college professor. And he said when he used to come into the classroom, the students would all be buzzing and everything. He'd have to call them to order and start the class. Now when he comes in, the room is silent because everybody is sitting there like this, looking at their cell phones. And that means there's less interaction and underscores what you said. You don't even know other people are around anymore, right? I mean, am I tapping into something that feeds right into what you're working on?
Yes, yes. Matter of fact, there's one book that me and D. Massey wrote. It's called Technology versus Old School. Whereas um, when I'll say like our age group, when we finished our chores in the house and we went outside, we ran everywhere. Hot peas and butter, kick the can, stick ball. We were running. These
I
kids
destroyed
today,
my shoulder playing stickball, I can tell you that.
no, but that's the thing.
So trying to throw a curveball.
These kids today only have the biggest thing on them is their thumbs. They're playing PlayStation.
Right.
We were more physically fit then than they are now.
So these books you have drawn up some guidelines. Give the folks who are watching. I mean, folks can pick them up, but give folks who are watching some guidelines and the kinds of things that you think would be useful, not only for young people, but for, as you said, elders, but for adults as well.
Well, the guidelines basically it's about respect, respect for your elders, respect for yourself,
Mhm.
carrying yourself well. Um, I mean, society has changed it. I remember when you got a little rip in your jeans, either you cut them to shorts or you throw them out completely. Now they got pants that's ripped up. This is a new style.
Well,
Cats
I'm
are turn around there. They got their pants sagging down with the belt on.
Yeah,
This
that is the style. I personally am not gonna get on people's fashions because those, of course, can change, but I think you wanna make that connection and say, "Look, let's kind of raise our game." Is that how we put it?
yes, yes.
What about interactions between people? What is your advice there, and what is the kind of etiquette that you think will be, useful, um, from a community standpoint to make us happier and make us, be able to get
Well,
along better.
the basis on that there is to turn around and talk things out. Be able to communicate as individuals. Letting people know what's on your mind, how you feel. If they felt there was something that went wrong, discuss it as adults or even as individuals, not to take it to another level. I mean, society has really gone off the deep end with not respecting others others' property or personal individual selves. You've got to be able to always be able to communicate. Communication, as I put in the book, is so very vital these days.
Mhm. You know, I like to talk. It's what I do for a living. But when I'm in the elevator now, I live on an upper floor, and my elevator is very slow. I love it when people come in, but and I chat with them. How you doing? How's the family? What's going on? How's the weather? And I love to do that because I love to interact with people. But a
Right.
lot of people, they're like, or like I go to the grocery store and I'm online and I see the cashier and I say, "Hey, what's going on? How are you today?" And then you know and the auto machines, the auto cashiers,
Yeah.
I hate that. I will never go to I want to talk to people, and I think that's the attitude that you're reaching into and saying, hey, be friends, be brothers, be sisters, make it work.
Yeah, that's the thing. You turn around, you've got to have interaction with people,
Yeah.
and like you say, there's machines that you got to respond to. I don't like even when you call in with certain things, you turn around, you get that automated thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Give me the representative. I want to talk to a human person.
Always wanna do that. You know what's interesting is I think a lot of these companies use the pandemic as an excuse, number 1, to lay off people, which of course bothers me tremendously, but, you'd call into the phone company, you call into, Verizon or AT&T, and you say, "Look, I gotta figure this out because and then you gotta go through a whole technical thing before you can find a human being, and it
Yeah.
takes a long time. What kind of feedback, have you gotten from either friends or others about this appeal? Maybe I'm mostly interested in young people saying, "Hey, you're right," because I think
Well,
you are.
actually, it was. I've ran into people that work in the educational field. There's been teachers.
Mhm.
There's been even a principal that actually has purchased 130 of each one of these books
Wow.
at one high school. So I know these are needed in the schools because, as I put in there, we got hit with two epidemics in the 80s, crack and HIV, which kind of knocked out a whole generation. But for those adults that made it through there and were able to come back, they learned traditions that had been handed down from our great grandparents to our grandparents to our parents to us. And during that period, boom, like I said, that generation that got knocked out. The parents that weren't able to make it back and pass on these traditional or what we say values, and they turned around. These kids didn't learn. They grew up not knowing these values. became friends with their kids. And what do you do with a friend? You get mad, you get angry, curse them
That's
out,
right.
and boom. But you can become friends again. But a parent and a child, I'll say it like this, are never on the same level. There's the parent and there's an adult.
Well, that
You
that
respect your parents.
is that ever true? You
Yeah.
know, the other thing which you mentioned, and I love the fact that it went into 100 or the principal bought 130 of them. It's very readable. The book is
Yeah.
very readable. It's written down to earth, and I know your interest is talking to young people about making changes. A lot of it is the choices. You know, you talked about video games versus
Oh,
picking up the phone and chatting with friends, or you know, in the old days. Look, I'm like you, played a ton of stickball out there. We'd play basketball in the park and all that kind of stuff,
right.
and that was the way we interacted. You know, I'll go out on a Saturday afternoon in the park, the same park that I used to play in across the street, and I won't see anybody in there. And I'm like, wait a minute, what are they doing? And you're right, they're sitting in there with their thumbs playing video games, or you know, doing something digitally which doesn't get them to interact. Do you have plans for doing more of this kind of thing, or you know, what are you working on? You're promoting the books. Give me a little bit about how you view what you've done and what might be next.
Well, my biggest thing is to try and, well, not even say try. I'm going to push them into the schools. I've gone to John F. Kennedy campus. It used to be high
The John
school.
F. Kennedy High School, oh, the campus. Okay, yeah.
Yes, and then I've been to a few schools. I'm like a traveling salesman. I'm going from school to school. If I could meet David Banks, that would be a blessing. We could take it straight from the top.
Well,
And then,
I will tell you because I've been around here a while, and I know Chancellor Banks pretty well, and I know the kind of work that he did in
yeah,
his own schools reflects exactly what you're talking about. I mean,
well,
you know, the that would work. But I love what you're doing, Percylee Anderson. Let's just tell
thank you.
people the two books. You can find them online. Not that we want to go digital, but you can positive
Well,
learning and play
actually,
etiquette.
I vend on the weekends. Usually, you can find me in front of the State Building on 125th Street.
Okay.
I'm also known as the map shirt man, as you can see.
Oh, there you
There's
go.
the Bronx there. Yeah, let me see if I got it correctly
You
there.
got
There
it.
you
We
go.
can see it. That's
There
good.
you go. And I've
That's
done
good.
all 5 boroughs. I've done Harlem,
Great.
New York City. I did
This
Puerto
is
Rico.
let me tell you something. You are the
Yes,
kind of person that we love in the Bronx because you're just pushing it forward, and you
yes,
know
yes.
that's what we want to do. Listen, thank you so much, certainly for your service, but your continued service of the people of the Bronx, and we appreciate it, ladies and gentlemen. Percylee Anderson, and
Thank you,
these are the
thank you.
two books, and we're thrilled that we gave him a chance to let everybody know this. Be nice, you know, cost nothing. Thank you
And
so much.
learn those values, so very important.
Great.
Courtesy, manner, and respect.
That's it. Courtesy, manner, and respect. I like that. CMR. All right. That will do it for us on the Bronx Buzz. We thank David. We thank Percylee. And we thank you. And if the curtain don't fall and the creek don't rise, Gary will be back next week. We'll see you then. Good night.